The morning my wife of 38 years passed away, I remember staring at her empty chair at the kitchen table, wondering how I would survive. That was 16 months ago. The grief counselor said it would get easier, but she never mentioned how the silence would become my constant companion. My name is Robert Mitchell, and at 61 years old, I found myself starting over in ways I never imagined. Elizabeth had handled everything, the finances, the house maintenance, even the grocery shopping in those final years when my back made lifting difficult. When she was gone, I discovered we had almost nothing. The medical bills had eaten through our savings. The life insurance barely covered the funeral. Our son lived in Denver and called once a month if I was lucky. Our daughter had her own family in Boston and her own problems. So I did what any desperate widower would do. I sold the house we'd lived in for 28 years, paid off what I could, and moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. Then I got a job. At 61, with a bad back and outdated skills, my options were limited. But the Helping Hands Senior Center needed a part-time receptionist, and they were willing to hire someone my age. The pay was modest, $13 an hour for 25 hours a week, but it was something. It gave me a reason to get dressed in the morning. Every day, I took the bus from my apartment to the senior center. The route passed through downtown, and I always got off 2 stops early so I could walk the last bit. The doctor said walking was good for my back, and honestly, I needed the fresh air. That's how I first noticed her. She sat on the same bench outside the public library every single morning. An old black woman with silver hair and gentle eyes. She wore the same faded purple jacket regardless of the weather, and she always had a small paper cup in front of her. She never asked anyone for money. She never called out to passers-by. She just sat there, quiet and dignified, watching the world go by. Something about her reminded me of my mother. Maybe it was the way she held herself, straight back despite her circumstances. Maybe it was the gentle way she nodded at people who walked past, even the ones who pretended not to see her. The first time I stopped, I didn't know what to say. I just dropped a $5 bill into her cup and mumbled something about having a nice day. She looked up at me with those warm brown eyes and said, "God bless you, sir. You have a kind heart." I walked away with tears in my eyes. I couldn't explain why. After that, it became our routine. Every morning I would stop by her bench, drop in whatever cash I had, sometimes $5, sometimes just the change from my pocket. We started talking. I learned her name was Dorothy Williams. She was 72 years old. She had been a middle school English teacher for 32 years before she retired. Her husband had passed away 7 years ago. Her pension had been lost in some kind of fraud scheme. Her apartment had been sold out from under her when the building was converted to condos. Now, she slept at the shelter when there was room, on the street when there wasn't. Her story broke my heart. A woman who had spent her life teaching children, shaping young minds, now sitting on a bench with a paper cup. The injustice of it made me angry in ways I hadn't felt in years. "You should be living somewhere warm," I told her one November morning when the temperature had dropped below freezing. "You should have a roof over your head." Dorothy just smiled. "The Lord provides, Mr. Robert. He sent you to me, didn't he?" I didn't feel like much of a provision. A few dollars here and there, some conversation to break up her lonely days. But Dorothy always seemed grateful, always had a kind word, always asked about my life at the senior center, about my children, about how I was coping with my own loss. In many ways, she became my friend. Perhaps my only real friend in this new life of mine. This went on for almost a year. Seasons changed, Summer turned to fall, fall to winter, winter to a cold and reluctant spring. I got a small raise at the senior center. My daughter called to say she was pregnant with her first child. My son sent a card for my 62nd birthday. Life moved forward in its slow, steady way. Then came that Tuesday morning in late March. I got off the bus at my usual stop, crossed the street, and headed toward the library. Dorothy was in her spot, but something was different. She was standing instead of sitting, and her eyes were scanning the street with an urgency I had never seen before. When she spotted me, she rushed forward, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "Mr. Robert," she said, her voice low and urgent, "I need you to listen to me very carefully." "Dorothy, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" No, it's not about me." She pulled me closer to the library wall, away from the stream of pedestrians. "It's about you. Something's wrong at your job, something dangerous." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I can't explain everything right now, but you need to be very careful. Watch the new bookkeeper, the young one with the blonde hair. Watch what she does with the donation records." She paused, her grip tightening on my arm. "And Mr. Robert, don't go home tonight. Sleep somewhere else, a hotel, a friend's place, anywhere but your apartment." "Dorothy, you're scaring me. How do you know about my job? How do you know about the bookkeeper?" "I know things," she said simply. "I've been watching, listening. People talk around a homeless woman like she's invisible. They say things they shouldn't say." She shook her head. "Please, just trust me. Come back tomorrow morning and I'll show you everything, but don't go home tonight. Promise me." Her eyes were pleading, and beneath the urgency I saw something that looked like fear, real fear. I promise," I heard myself say. Dorothy released my arm and stepped back. Good. Now go to work. Act normal. Don't ask questions. Don't look at the records. Just do your job and leave. I'll explain everything tomorrow." She shuffled back to her bench and sat down, returning to her usual position as if nothing had happened. I stood there for a long moment, my heart racing, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. The walk to the senior center felt longer than usual. My mind was spinning with questions. How did Dorothy know about my work? What had she heard, and why was she so frightened? The Helping Hands Senior Center was a modest facility that served about 180 elderly clients. We offered day programs, meals, social activities, and various support services. The staff was small, just 14 people including me. The director was a woman named Linda Crawford, who had run the place for 11 years. The clients loved her. The staff respected her. I had always thought of her as a good person. The new bookkeeper Dorothy had mentioned was a young woman named Jessica Parker. She had been hired about 3 months ago, shortly after the old bookkeeper retired. She was 27, pretty, with bright blonde hair and an easy smile. Everyone liked her. She was efficient, friendly, and always willing to help. I had never thought twice about her until now. I sat at my reception desk, greeting clients and answering phones like I did every day. But my mind was elsewhere. I found myself watching Jessica whenever she passed through the lobby. She seemed normal, cheerful, nothing suspicious. What was Dorothy talking about? Around lunchtime, Linda came out of her office and stopped by my desk. "Robert, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you noticed anything unusual lately with the donations? I mean, any complaints from donors? Anything that seemed off?" My stomach tightened. "No, I don't think so. Why?" Linda frowned. "It's probably nothing. One of our regular donors called yesterday, said her tax receipt didn't match what she thought she donated. I'm sure it's just a clerical error. Jessica's looking into it." "I see. Just let me know if you hear anything." She smiled and walked away. I sat very still, staring at my computer screen without seeing it. A donation discrepancy. Jessica looking into it, Dorothy's warning about the bookkeeper and the donation records. It couldn't be a coincidence. But what could I do? Dorothy had told me not to ask questions, not to look at the records, just act normal and leave. The rest of the day crawled by. Every time Jessica walked past my desk, I felt a chill. Every time Linda's office door opened, I tensed. By 5 o'clock, my nerves were frayed. I gathered my things and headed for the door, but Linda's voice stopped me. "Robert, before you go, can you come to my office for a minute?" My heart dropped. Of course. I followed her down the hall, my mind racing. Did she suspect something? Did she know that I knew? Or was this about something else entirely? Linda closed the door behind us and gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." I sat. "I wanted to talk to you about something confidential," she said, taking a seat behind her desk. "I've been at this center for 11 years, and I've never had to deal with anything like this before." "Like what?" "Fraud." The word hung in the air. "Someone is stealing from the center. I've suspected it for a few weeks now, but I didn't have proof. Now I do." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The discrepancies in the donation records, they're not clerical errors. Someone has been systematically skimming money from our donations. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there, but it's added up. We're missing almost $35,000 over the past 3 months. "Oh my God," I whispered, and I meant it. "I called in an auditor last week. He confirmed my suspicions." Linda leaned forward. "Robert, I'm telling you this because I trust you. You've been here for over a year. You're honest and reliable, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely truthful with me. Anything. Have you noticed anyone accessing the financial records who shouldn't be? Anyone asking questions about donations? Anyone behaving strangely?" I thought about Dorothy's warning. I thought about Jessica. I thought about Linda herself, sitting here in her office, telling me about fraud that someone else had supposedly committed. How did I know Linda wasn't involved? How did I know this wasn't some kind of trap? I haven't noticed anything," I said carefully. "But I'm just the receptionist. I don't have access to the financial systems." Linda nodded slowly. I know you don't. That's why I'm ruling you out." She paused. "The police will be involved soon. I wanted to warn you. There may be interviews, questions. I just need to know that you'll cooperate fully." Of course I will." "Good." She stood up. "Thank you, Robert. You can go." I left her office on shaky legs, the police, interviews, and Dorothy's warning echoing in my head. Don't go home tonight. I didn't go home. Instead, I walked to a budget hotel about a mile from my apartment and paid $52 for a room. I told myself it was ridiculous. I told myself Dorothy was just a confused old woman with wild theories. I told myself I was overreacting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the stiff hotel bed staring at the ceiling, playing the day's events over and over in my mind. Linda's revelation about the fraud, Jessica's involvement, or lack thereof, Dorothy's mysterious knowledge. How did she know? At 2 a.m, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost didn't answer. "Hello? Mr. Mitchell?" A man's voice, professional and clipped. "This is Officer Daniels with the Chicago Police Department. I'm calling about your apartment building." My blood went cold. "What about it?" "There's been an incident. A fire. The building has been evacuated. We're trying to account for all residents. Are you home right now?" "No," I managed. "No, I'm staying somewhere else tonight." That's fortunate. The fire started on your floor. Your unit sustained significant damage. Sir, are you all right? I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Sir? I'm fine, I whispered. I'm fine. The officer gave me more information, an address to check in with, a number to call for emergency housing assistance. I wrote it all down mechanically, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. A fire on my floor. If I had gone home, if I had been in my bed like any normal night, Dorothy had known. Somehow, she had known. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. At 7 in the morning, I took a cab to the library. Dorothy was there in her usual spot, but she stood up when she saw me coming. "You're alive," she said, and her voice cracked with emotion. "Thank God. Thank God." "Dorothy," I grabbed her hands. "How did you know? The fire, my apartment, how did you know?" "Come sit." She led me to the bench and we sat down together. She reached into her faded jacket and pulled out a small notebook, the kind children use in school. "I've been watching your building for 3 weeks," she said quietly, "ever since I overheard something that worried me." "Overheard what? Where?" "Here." She gestured at the bench, the library, the street. "People talk, Mr. Robert. They make phone calls, they have conversations. They don't notice the homeless woman on the bench. They don't think she's listening." She opened the notebook. Inside were pages of cramped handwriting, dates and times and observations. 3 weeks ago, 2 men sat on this bench, right where we're sitting now. They were talking about money, a lot of money. Money being moved from somewhere to somewhere else. Money that belonged to old people. She looked at me. They mentioned the Helping Hands Senior Center. My heart was pounding. What did they say? They said the operation was going well. They said the bookkeeper was doing her job. They said no one suspected anything. She turned a page. Then one of them mentioned a problem. He said there was an old man at the center, a receptionist, who was getting suspicious. He said he had been asking questions about the donation records. But I hadn't asked any questions. I didn't know anything. I know. But someone thought you did. And someone decided you were a risk. Dorothy's voice was heavy. Last night, those same 2 men were back. They were talking about a fire. They were talking about making it look like an electrical accident. They mentioned your name, Mr. Robert. They mentioned your apartment number. I felt sick. Who are they? Did you recognize them? One of them I had seen before, at the senior center. Who? Dorothy reached into her notebook and pulled out a photograph. Grainy and dark, clearly taken with a cheap phone, but I could make out the figure well enough. It was Linda Crawford. And standing next to her was a man I didn't recognize, tall and thin, with a sharp face. "I took this 2 days ago," Dorothy said. "I followed them when they left here. They went to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. They met with 2 other people. I couldn't hear what they said, but I got this." She showed me another photo. Linda, the tall man, and 2 others I had never seen. "I think it's bigger than just the bookkeeper," Dorothy said. "I think your director is running the whole thing." I stared at the photos, my mind reeling. Linda. Linda, who I had trusted. Linda, who had told me about the fraud just yesterday, who had looked me in the eye and lied. She was setting me up, I realized. She told me about the fraud yesterday. She said the police would be involved. She said there would be interviews. She was going to pin it on me. "And when the police found your body in that fire," Dorothy added, "the case would be closed. Tragic accident. The thief died before he could be brought to justice. No one would look any further." I felt a wave of nausea. I need to go to the police. Yes. Dorothy pressed the notebook into my hands. Take this. Everything I've seen, everything I've heard, it's all written down. The photos are on this phone. She handed me an old flip phone. It's not much, but it's proof. I looked at this woman, this homeless woman who I had given pocket change to for a year. This woman who had spent 3 weeks watching, listening, gathering evidence. This woman who had saved my life. Dorothy, why? Why did you do all this? She smiled, that same gentle smile I had seen every morning for 12 months. Because you treated me like a person, Mr. Robert. You stopped. You talked. You looked me in the eye. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know what that means to someone like me? Tears were streaming down my face. I was a teacher for 32 years, she continued. I taught English. I taught students about integrity, about standing up for what's right, about using your knowledge to help others. When I lost everything, I thought those days were behind me. But then I saw you, and I saw those men, and I realized I could still do something. I could still be useful. You saved my life. You gave me back mine. She squeezed my hands. Now go to the police, show them everything, and don't worry about me. I'll be fine. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share powerful true stories every single day, and your support means the world to us. The next few weeks were a blur. I went to the police with Dorothy's notebook and photos. They were skeptical at first, but the evidence was solid. They brought in investigators, accountants, federal agents. What they uncovered was staggering. Linda Crawford had been running a fraud scheme for over 4 years, not just at Helping Hands, but at 3 other senior centers across the state. She had stolen over $1.8 million from programs meant to help elderly people. The tall man in the photo was her brother, a financial consultant who had helped her launder the money. Jessica, the bookkeeper, was her niece, brought in to help manage the operation. They had been planning to close down the Helping Hands operation and disappear, but they needed a scapegoat first. They needed someone to blame for the missing money. That someone was me. The fire at my apartment wasn't an accident, it was arson. The police found evidence of an accelerant, traced the purchase of gasoline to Linda's brother. They arrested all 4 of them within a week. I testified at the trial. I told the jury everything. Dorothy testified too, wearing a borrowed dress and speaking with the calm dignity of a woman who had spent her life in classrooms. Linda got 14 years. Her brother got 11. Jessica got 4. The 4th conspirator, a man who had been hired to start the fire, got 18. Justice was served. But for me, the real story was just beginning. After the trial, I went looking for Dorothy. She wasn't at her bench. She wasn't at the shelter. No one had seen her for days. I was frantic. What if Linda's people had found her? What if something had happened to her? 3 days later, I found her at the hospital. She had collapsed on the street, dehydrated and malnourished. Her kidneys were failing. The doctor said she had been living with untreated diabetes for years. I sat by her bed, holding her hand, crying. "Don't cry, Mr. Robert," she said, her voice weak but still gentle. "This isn't your fault. I should have done more. I should have helped you sooner. You helped me every day. You gave me something to look forward to. That was enough. But it wasn't enough. Not for me." I spent the next month fighting for Dorothy Williams. I contacted social services, legal aid, housing authorities. I wrote letters to newspapers, to politicians, to anyone who would listen. I told her story. The story of a retired teacher who had lost everything through no fault of her own. People responded. Donations came in. A lawyer took her case pro bono, fighting to recover her lost pension. A nonprofit housing organization found her an apartment. The school district where she had taught for 32 years started a fund in her name. By June, Dorothy was out of the hospital and living in a clean, safe apartment of her own. I visited her on move-in day. She sat in her new living room looking around at the furniture we had assembled, at the books people had donated, at the photos of her late husband that I had helped her hang on the wall. "Mr. Robert," she said, shaking her head, "you didn't have to do all this." Yes, I did. I sat down beside her. "You saved my life, Dorothy. Not just from the fire, but from the loneliness, from the emptiness. You gave me a friend when I needed one most. This is the least I could do." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You know what I told my students every year on the first day of class? I told them that life isn't just about what happens to us. It's about choices. The small choices we make every day. How we treat each other. How we help or ignore. Those choices shape the future. They create ripples that spread out in ways we can never predict." "Ripples," I repeated. "That's right. You stopped at my bench one morning and dropped $5 in my cup. That was a small choice, a tiny ripple. But look where it led. Look at everything that came from that one small act of kindness." I thought about it. If I hadn't stopped that first morning, if I hadn't kept stopping day after day, if Dorothy hadn't felt that I was worth protecting, if she hadn't spent 3 weeks gathering evidence that saved my life, all of it, everything. It began with a $5 bill and a few kind words. "The world can be cruel," Dorothy continued. "People can be cruel. But kindness exists too. And when we choose kindness, even in small ways, we change the world. We create ripples that can grow into waves." I'm 63 now. The trial was over a year ago. My daughter had her baby, a beautiful girl named Claire. My son came to visit for Christmas with his whole family. Life goes on. I still work at a senior center, a different one now, and I make sure to look out for signs of fraud. I still take the bus and walk the last few stops, and every morning I stop by a certain apartment building and have coffee with my friend Dorothy. She's healthier now. Her diabetes is under control. Her pension was partially recovered. She volunteers at the library, helping kids with their homework, teaching them about literature, about integrity, about the power of small choices. Sometimes people ask me what I learned from everything that happened. They expect me to talk about crime and corruption, about the dangers that can hide in ordinary places, about how you never really know who to trust. But that's not what I learned. What I learned is this: kindness matters. Every single act, no matter how small, every time you stop instead of walking by, every time you look someone in the eye, every time you treat another person with dignity and respect. You never know who's watching. You never know what ripples you're creating. You never know whose life you might be saving, or whose life might save yours. Dorothy Williams was a homeless woman on a bench. I was a lonely widower with pocket change to spare. Together, we brought down a criminal organization, sent 4 people to prison, recovered millions of stolen dollars, and built a friendship that will last for the rest of our lives. All because I stopped one morning and dropped $5 in a paper cup. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you something. If this touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that share button. You never know whose life might be changed by this message. So that's my advice to you. Whoever you are, wherever you are, be kind. Stop for the person everyone else walks past. Take a moment to see the humanity in people who have been made invisible by their circumstances. You never know. That small act of kindness might come back to save your life. It saved mine. I think about that bench every day. I think about the mornings I almost walked past. I think about how easy it would have been to ignore Dorothy, to pretend I didn't see her, to keep my $5 and my distance. I think about all the people who did walk past. Good people, probably. Busy people. People with their own problems and their own pain. But I stopped. And that choice, that one small choice, changed everything. It's not about the money. It never was. It was about seeing someone, about acknowledging someone's humanity when the world had decided they were invisible. Dorothy taught me that we're all connected in ways we don't understand, that our actions ripple out into the world, touching lives we'll never know about. Last week, Dorothy and I went back to that bench outside the library. We sat there together, watching people walk by, watching the world continue its endless motion. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked her. "The teaching?" "Every day," she said. "But I'm still teaching, Mr. Robert, just in a different classroom." She nodded toward the street, toward the people passing by, toward the man who had just dropped $1 in a cup left on the bench by someone else. "That man just learned something," she said. "He doesn't know it yet, but he did. And someday, maybe years from now, that lesson will come back to him. That's what teaching is. Planting seeds and trusting they'll grow." I held her hand and we sat there in comfortable silence. 2 old people on a bench, 2 survivors, 2 friends. And I thought, this is what matters. Not the money, not the trial, not even the justice. This. Connection. Kindness. The choice to see each other. That's the real story. That's the only story that matters. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily stories. Your support keeps these stories alive and spreading hope across the world.